Well, good afternoon to you. 406 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Congressman Pat Fallon will be with us from Texas. He's on the House Oversight Committee. He was a part of questioning Hunter Biden's business partner yesterday. We'll find out what it was like inside the room. And we'll find out if there are any headlines we missed from those conversations. You can join us today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. The Supreme Court ruled recently that you're not allowed to be racist when deciding which students attend your college. But that hasn't stopped some colleges from attempting to continue their racism. For more on this, we go to Aaron Sibarium now. He's an associate editor at the Washington Free Beacon, a great reporter, and he joins us on the phone. Aaron, great to have you with us, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Tell me, Columbia Law School has been caught trying to be racist again. You have caught them. Tell me exactly what happened here.
Yeah, so yesterday I noticed that on their page for prospective applicants, they said that all applicants were going to be required to submit a 90-second video statement to assess the applicant's personal strength. Why it had to be a 90-second video statement rather than just a written statement isn't entirely clear, but it sure seems a bit suspicious given that the Supreme Court just ruled that schools can't consider race in the admissions process. So I saw that, I thought it was suspicious, and that afternoon I reached out for comment to Columbia and quoted some people who had expressed concern that the school was trying to circumvent the law. And within hours, the school got back to me and said, oh, that 2-paragraph section about the requirement on the website, that was posted by mistake. We're definitely not doing that.
Because they know how obviously bad it looks. That the idea here is they were clearly looking for a visual cue to establish the race of the applicant, and they would make their decisions based on what they saw. I mean, this is all by inference that you and I are concluding this, or at least that I am. It seems pretty obvious to me what was going on here.
Well, your inference is shared by Edward Bloom, the founder of Students for Fair Admissions, which is the group that filed the Supreme Court case that overturned affirmative action. He said, look, there's just no plausible reason why the school would be doing this other than that they're trying to discriminate. And a lot of other people, including Columbia law students and alums, told me the same thing.
What?
Some of those.
What is this though? Why this cartoonish adherence to racial prejudice in college admissions? Why are they so obsessed with this, up to and including possibly violating a Supreme Court decision?
Well, because there's entire bureaucracies devoted to it within the campus, within the university administrations. And, look, it's been the law of the land, or it was, for, the better part of 50 years, right? This was just, you were allowed to do this, and it became very entrenched. There was the whole diversity rationale thing that, even though it really had, I think, very little legal weight because it was in the controlling opinion, suddenly everyone just sort of assumed, we have to make our classes diverse. That's the only way we can do this. It started as a kind of program of compensatory justice, trying to, remedy the harms done to a very specific slice of the American population, namely Black Americans, morphed into this much broader project of trying to racial engineer the demographic composition of the class. And I think that idea became almost second nature. It's like, well, of course we have to pursue diversity.
Yep.
That's just what we did. Now the law has changed, and so suddenly those long settled notions are being challenged and threatened with litigation.
It's funny, I love this idea that they only wanted 90 seconds of any particular applicant's opinions. Columbia Law School was like, look, you can send in a video, but not more than 90 seconds, please. We don't want to watch more than 90 seconds of these 18-year-olds or at least it is Columbia Law School, these 22-year-olds applying to law school.
we can figure out all we need to know with 90 seconds of visual inspection. Doesn't take longer than that.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a little too on the nose if they were just like send a photo. Like at that point, you're like, okay, there's no plausible explanation for this other than racism.
It is worth emphasizing that the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which is the agency that enforces workplace discrimination laws, they explicitly say that employers should not ask for photographs. It's not technically illegal to do that. It's not like the law explicitly says you can't ask for photographs, but they say, look, if you get hit with a discrimination lawsuit, this is going to be very, very powerful evidence that you were trying to discriminate, so don't do it. It's very risky, and there's really no reason why that same logic wouldn't apply in the education context.
It is interesting, the use of visuals in applying for jobs or admission to something has always been a big debate because, in symphonies, for instance, in orchestras, they have what's called blind auditions that were meant to resolve discrimination. You don't want to judge people based on their visuals. You want to judge them based on the merit. Do they produce a good sound with that instrument? And that makes a lot of sense. In fact, women were the beneficiaries of that in a major way. Talented female musicians all of a sudden started finding seats on those orchestras that they wouldn't have otherwise had because of some sort of, prejudice against them because they were women. But nowadays, you get like the New York Times advocating for getting rid of blind auditions in order to increase diversity for orchestras, where the priority is about the racial composition of the orchestra rather than the sound that they're creating.
Yeah, and I believe you've even seen some minority musicians who have in recent years also pushed back against the push to get rid of blind auditions. They say, look, I mean, this is as fair as it could possibly get.
Yes.
There's just no way that getting rid of this will help anyone. In fact, I have heard that they are so committed to blind auditions that they don't just put up a screen, but in some cases they have special padding on the floor so that when people walk, you can't tell by the sound of their gait whether they're lighter or heavier, so you can't discern whether they're a guy or a girl.
Yes.
I mean, some orchestras take it very, very far.
Yeah.
And apparently that model of blind justice is anathema now
I know.
Or was anathema for a few hours there to Columbia Law School.
It's also cartoonish. It's incoherent is what it is. The Marine Corps did something similar in for officer promotion packages. You'd submit a package because you'd like to be promoted, and for years photos were included. You'd include a photo, and in the Marine Corps that kind of makes sense. The physical fitness standards you might expect out of a Marine, like that guy looks like a Marine. Look at that guy. It's not about the race. It's about the physical presence of that person. And so what would happen was the Marines would look at all these photos. They'd look at these promotion packages, and then they'd make decisions. It wasn't about the photo. It was fundamentally about merit, but the photo was attached. The Marines got rid of the photos because they thought that, there must be racial prejudice at play. There's too few black officers being promoted because the photos are being included, and people are subconsciously kicking out the black applicants. It turns out the opposite was happening. It turns out the Marine Corps was actually, when they would see a black applicant, they were graded higher by these promotion boards, and they were elevated because when they got rid of the photos, fewer black officers were making it through, and so then they had to decide to reverse the decision. It's so incoherent, and is all I'm saying, Aaron Sibarium, that it's the kind of stuff that's dangerous that the Supreme Court is trying to prevent, which is racial discrimination that hurts everybody involved.
Yeah, no, exactly right. There's really no excuse for this. The other thing I would just say is, in trying to discriminate based on race, I think this proposal would have also opened up the door to a whole host of kind of unconscious biases about just sort of physical attractiveness, frankly. You're not supposed to talk about that, but there clearly is a bias in favor of beautiful people. And I don't think that bias really has any more place in law school admissions than racial bias. Mm-hmm. So, as far as I'm concerned, I I chortled, but was also happy to see that Columbia ended this policy moments after it began.
Yeah. I don't know, though. I do have questions about, though. If I hire a hot lawyer, am I more likely to win the court case that I'm engaged in? Does that play a role?
I mean, now you get into interesting questions, because then someone will say, well, but like maybe like hiring a lawyer of a certain race in a certain kind of case, like maybe a black prosecutor would have added credibility. Look, I mean, you could make those arguments. I get it. And there are even some legal contexts like jury selection where things like that, can start to come up. But I mean, for a law school, I don't think you want to go down that road.
So my final thought on this is, like, first of all, I love that you caught them doing this, Aaron Sibarium. So Columbia Law School, in the wake of that Supreme Court decision, starts asking for video applications on their website so that they can racially judge the applicants. But then they immediately removed it. And it makes me wonder, what kind of law school are they if they think that they can get past the Supreme Court by using video applications?
Yeah, well, I would say that the fact that they removed it so quickly actually should reassure people that the Supreme Court decision is going to have teeth, right? Some people have said they're going to try to get around it any way they can, as if that means the decision will have no weight and just be dead letter.
Yeah.
But if their attempts to get around it can be stymied by a single journalist sending them an email, I mean, then those circumventions aren't particularly effective. So I think there actually is a lesson here, which is that law does matter. And once you start to get the bad PR of breaking the law,
it's not good for a law school.
It's bad. Yeah, it looks really bad. So I do think it's going to limit them. Like they're people should be a little more optimistic. Like this decision actually is going to change things. And schools will try their best to get around it, but I don't think that they're going to be able to just go about business as usual by other means.
All right, Aaron Sibarium from the Washington Free Beacon, thank you very much for your reporting and your time today. Good to talk to you, sir.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
That's I love the Free Beacon. They've got a great publication, great reporters over there. I just got a text message from a friend who said that he recently attended a class reunion at Columbia Law School recently. The dean spoke and bragged that for the first time under her leadership, a majority of the entering class will be women and minorities. And then the whole crowd cheered wildly. Like, yeah, all right, good. You know what's the worst? What? White men, yeah. And then they all got their torches and pitchforks, and then they went after a white guy. It was great. It was a big celebration at Columbia Law School. Do these people hear themselves? You know what's great? That we're racially and judging the classes and the genders. Boy. Always, our thanks to Ed Rodriguez for all of the updates on what's happening on the road. We are watching as the GW Parkway cleanup continues from that wild storm on Saturday that came right through our area and just blasted down so many trees and ripped roofs up and all sorts of things. And I understand that part of the GW Parkway is reopened this afternoon, that crews have been working diligently to remove all of the trees and debris. And they've removed now more than 500 tons of trees and other debris on the roadways just to try and get things back open. They opened up one lane on the northbound parkway. That's between Spout Run and the Capitol Beltway. But meanwhile, the southbound lanes remain closed, and they're still trying to clean up 500 tons. That's a lot of stuff that fell down. And I have to say, I mentioned yesterday that Saturday, I was out at church Saturday night. And as the storm came over, and it's always a neat experience to be in church as his thunder is rattling the whole building in the midst of the sermon, and you're thinking to yourself, man, God is really present, isn't he? And so the storm goes by, and luckily after it went by pretty quickly for us, so we were able to, get out to our car and stay dry after church was over. But then I got on the roadway, and I'm driving home, and light after light is either flashing yellow or completely dead, completely off. Now, if a light is flashing yellow, that means that the cross traffic has a flashing red light. That's what that means. And so let me just remind people how you do this, because I feel like I have to. I was out there and I was like, nobody knows how to drive. There were people who were stopping for the yellow light flashing. You don't do that. The flashing yellow means proceed with caution. Your lane has the right of way. Go. Now, the other lights, the ones that are out completely, it was like Mad Max. Like nobody knew what they were doing. If the lights are out completely at an intersection, completely, nothing is on, the intersection becomes a four-way stop. You stop when you reach to the front of the line and allow everybody else to go as you do on a four-way stop. Whoever's up first up is the first to go when the next chance comes. That's it. That's it. But people don't know what they're doing. I'm watching as the traffic lights are out. 10 people go through at once. Somebody's creeping out into the intersection, hoping that the traffic will stop to let them get by. Somebody's just sitting there, like, praying that the lights will come back on to tell him what to do. He's probably wearing a mask, too. Like, sitting there in his car. Ladies and gentlemen, you have to be a little more resourceful in the midst of these storms and have some cognizance. And I kept thinking, I was like, how long ago did any of these people learn how to drive? Nobody knows what they're doing. Nobody. Now, candidly, some people know. I'll take back that last assertion. Some people knew what they were doing. They treated it the right way. But there was so much chaos out there. So this is just a reminder. That was a test run Saturday. Some of the lights went out. When all the lights go out, four-way stop, okay? Do we need to why don't we do like a driver's course? Like once a week, we'll just go through basic rules of the road on how to drive in the D.C. area. Remarkable. Just remarkable. Coming up in the next hour, Congressman Pat Fallon is going to join us with the House Oversight Committee. Tell us about the questioning of Devon Archer yesterday, what that was really like behind closed doors. Also, we're hearing news at this hour that Jack Smith may be preparing to open his mouth in front of a microphone very soon. Things could get crazy. Stay with us. We'll cover the details. Well, good afternoon to you. 4:35 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Congressman Pat Fallon joins us from the House Oversight Committee. He was involved in questioning the Biden family business partner, Devon Archer, yesterday. We'll find out if we're missing anything on what appears to be very important information regarding Biden family corruption. And you can join us today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Now, from where I'm sitting right now, I mentioned that we could hear from Jack Smith soon, and that, of course, is always possible. I don't know for a fact that that's the case. My understanding is that there's going to be a presser from the Justice Department of some kind coming up within the next hour or so. So we will keep an eye out for any news that develops. I wanted to tell you about something that is going on in the world of lefty incoherence. That seems to be one of the themes today. NBC had an article this week about the online world of people who say that they can change their race. On the internet, there are groups of people who say they can change their race. They are practitioners of something called race change to another. It even has an acronym called RCTA, race change to another. And they purport to be able to manifest physical changes in their appearance and even their genetics to become a completely different race. Now, in a world where a man can say he's a woman and a woman can say she's a man and any other version of gender that they want to invent, that doesn't seem that crazy to think that maybe race is also a jump ball, that it could be whatever you want it to be. And the NBC piece revolves around a young woman, Alyssa, a teenager, 15 years old, who says she has felt a special connection with Japan since before she hit double digits. The high school student, who has to be anonymous for fear of being doxxed online, was born in Ukraine and lives in Maryland. By the way, Alyssa, if you can hear us right now, I would love your phone call. I would love to chat with you about this particular phenomenon. She doesn't go by Alyssa anymore. She now goes by the Japanese name Mayuki and listens to subliminals, this is in quotes, subliminals, that promise that she will wake up and be Japanese. So far, she believes that by listening to YouTube videos with lo-fi music and photos of East Asian facial features while she sleeps, her vision has cleared, her eyelids have become smaller, and her hair is just a bit darker. What? Do you remember the theory that like you could take headphones, like you didn't know how to speak Spanish, but you were taking Spanish classes and you wanted to cram for your exam? You would take headphones and just have Spanish language pumping through them, and then, stick the Spanish language into your Walkman, close it up, wear the headphones, and overnight just listen to it while you were sleeping, and it would just keep speaking Spanish words, and you would ingest all of this Spanish and then be fluent by the morning. You remember these theories? Well, apparently this is what you can do with your race. You turn on a YouTube video with lo-fi music and photos of East Asian facial features. And NBC, that is, very helpfully included some of these videos for real inside of the article. And it's just pictures of random Asian girls. And throughout is music that sounds like this. I'm sorry, I should have probably given you a warning ahead of time. If you're not Asian, you might become Asian by listening to this. You can't be serious. So anyway, apparently this girl just listens to the music, stares at the screen, and she becomes more Asian. There's another one here. There's another video that they included in this piece. It's the same deal, and it sounds like this. You just keep listening. Do you feel your facial features changing right now? Is it working? What in the world is this? So, NBC explores this whole thing and treats it very legitimately, like it's possible. Is it possible? Experts underscore it is impossible to change your race. Quote, "It's just belief," said Jamie Cohen, an assistant professor of cultural and media studies at Queens College, City University of New York. Quote, "It doesn't ever really work because it's not doing anything." But they have convinced themselves that it works because there's other people who have convinced themselves as well. Though they do not constitute a full-blown trend, a number of racial subliminal creators have popped up on YouTube in recent years, with videos racking up on average over 500,000 views apiece. Okay, I'm sorry, what constitutes a trend? What's the threshold number for a trend? When does something, that's a trend now. They say it's not a full-blown trend, but each of these YouTube videos are racking up over 500,000 views. People just watching and listening to this music, thinking that they're going to become Asian by watching it. On TikTok, dozens of accounts have emerged in recent weeks, sharing similar goals and aesthetics and documenting what people describe as their race change journeys. Media experts also point to the potential dark side of the exoticization of Asian culture, saying it could be a form of modern yellowface. Is that racist to say yellowface? Or the act of non-Asian peoples making their appearance more Asian-like. Korean-American poet Margaret Rhee, an assistant professor of media studies at the New School in New York, said that this RCTA phenomenon reflects the current media climate in which East Asian media enjoys widespread popularity internationally and in the United States. Quote, "There's also the underbelly of that where we want to be careful," she says, "because there's always problems around fetishization or objectification that East Asian cultures have always been subjected to, meaning being revered for these kinds of exotic characteristics, but not really fully seen." NBC goes on to say that race isn't real. Race is not genetic, says NBC. But they contend that even though race is a cultural construct, it is impossible to change your race because of the systemic inequalities inherent to being born into a certain race. Okay, let me see if I understand this correctly. Race is fake. It is a cultural construct. There's nothing biological about it, but you can't change your race. It's an invention into which you are born and you can't change. I think this is incoherent. Would you agree? David Frund, a historian of race and politics and an associate professor at the University of Maryland, College Park, corroborates the idea that a biological race does not exist. What we know today as, quote, race is a combination of inherited characteristics. Inherited characteristics? Well, that would be biology, wouldn't it? And cultural traditions passed down through generations, he said. In addition, Frund said the modern concept of race is inseparable from the systemic racial hierarchy, hundreds of years in the making. Simply put, changing races is not possible because biological races themselves are not real. All right, there's a period on that sentence, but except for the parts in which they are real, because David Freund, the professor at the University of Maryland College Park, said that race is due in part to your, quote, inherited characteristics. All right, so that's what's going on. Seth Dillon, he's the CEO of the Babylon Bee. He read this article, and he goes, okay, wait a second. He said, quote, this article argues that your race is fixed from birth and it can't be changed. It also argues that race isn't real. It's just a social construct. It argues that the reason you can't change your race is because race isn't real. So that's what NBC was exploring this week, just to give you a sense of what's going on. Let me see if there's any other gems in that article that I wanted to tell you about. The piece ends with Kevin Nadal, professor of psychology at City University of New York. Quote, I would say the same thing that I would say to somebody who's struggling with any part of their identity. Talk about what it is that makes you want to change that part of you. So, in other words, like, why do you want to be Asian? Why are you watching these videos and listening to this music to desperately change your features because you think that by doing that, that'll occur, even though it won't? Why would you do that? And so the advice from this professor of psychology is you should accept yourself. You have to talk about what it is that makes you want to change that part of you, he says, which, by the way, is phenomenal advice. If you knew someone who told you, if a friend of yours came up to you and was like, hey, I've been listening to these YouTube videos, I've been watching them, and I think I'm becoming more East Asian, you'd slap them. You'd be like, no, dude, get to the bottom of whatever's wrong with you that's making you think that this is something you need to do. Okay, so if that's the advice for the race changers, the Rachel Dolezals of the world, why isn't that the advice for the men who want to chop it off? Why isn't that, when a guy comes forward and is like, I think I'm a woman, I'd like to go under the knife now, please. You're just like, whoa, wait a second. According to that psychology professor, when it comes to race, what you're supposed to do is slam on the brakes and say, let's talk about what makes you want to change that part of you. But no, with the gender stuff, it's just full-blown destruction. Right this way, sir. Excuse me, ma'am. Isn't that wild? Meanwhile, here's a big question for you on the left's incoherence. Is it possible to be trans-freckled? Do you know what this means? Trans-freckled? Well, let me say up front, I made up the phrase trans-freckled, but it fits this Washington Post piece this week. The Washington Post has a story up today that says that freckles used to be a flaw, and now people are paying for fake freckles, to have fake freckles put on their bodies because they don't have freckles. They say when Haley Buchanan was a little kid in the 2000s, other kids at school teased her for having freckles. She hated it. She came to hate the freckles themselves. Then, as we all do, Buchanan, 23 years old, grew up. She became an esthetician and opened her own beauty studio in Washington State called Face Yourself Beauty. And you can imagine how she felt when she began to see, first on TikTok and Instagram, then this year in her own studio, women with spotless, even doll-like complexions determined to get freckles. Years ago, they were so undesirable as to draw taunts. Now, she says with an incredulous laugh, it's like the trend. First of all, there have been beautiful women with freckles for a lot longer than just starting in the 2000s. There's plenty of supermodels that have had freckles. What are they talking about? This is ahistoric. Wasn't Cindy Crawford famous for having a beauty mark on her face? Like, the idea that this is like some new phenomenon. Oh, freckles are attractive all of a sudden. And now they're saying that people are apparently paying to have freckles affixed to their faces. Buchanan, the same woman that this story centers on, earlier this year added semi-permanent fake freckles to her menu of services. The freckles are similar in application to the eyebrow tattooing procedure known as microblading, and they can last up to 3 years before fading. Okay, so people are having freckles tattooed to their faces. You know, I hope they don't look like Raggedy Ann or something. Like, I hope this is believable. I hope their freckles can pass, as they say in the gender craze stuff. That person passes as a woman. This summer, Buchanan has done the procedure, which can take more than an hour and costs up to $225 for 2 clients a week. $225 to have somebody draw freckles on your face. America's done a 180 on freckles. Freckle filters are now all over Snapchat and Instagram. When you search for freckle on Ulta's website, Ulta's the beauty retail chain, they have things that help you get rid of freckles, and they also have freckle creation tools. They have something called a freckle pen you can buy, a freckle maker. There's a freckle pen called a Freck. They actually just call it a Freck. It was introduced in 2017. It has become the best-known name in the faux freckle game. And Sephora sells it too. They started selling it in 2021. They say in relatively short time, in other words, freckles have transformed from an imperfection to an acceptable trait to now a booming cosmetic industry. So that's what's happening. So now is this Irish cultural appropriation? What is going on here? Are you allowed to do that? Remember, like a couple years back, every so often you see a YouTube video or like a social media video of some white kid who is wearing like dreads or cornrows or something, and then gets yelled at by some passerby. Hey, that's cultural appropriation. That's a black thing. You're not allowed to do that. So if you start drawing freckles all over your face, if you have, as the Washington Post puts it, a porcelain white doll-like face, is this Irish cultural appropriation? Are you allowed to do that? What are the rules exactly on this? Are you allowed to be trans-freckled? Is the first thing you present to the public allowed to be a lie? Because she has gorgeous freckles. They say Megan Fox, the actress and model, she has freckles on her face, and she did a Sports Illustrated photo shoot recently, and they decided she didn't have enough freckles on her face, so they added more freckles to the woman's face. Megan Fox, the whole reason she's famous is for being a hot chick. Why do you have to add freckles to her face? None of this makes sense. But, this is the left. So you can't change your race, but you can change your freckles, and you can change your gender. I'm not exactly sure what the rules are, but my guess is by next week they'll be different. It is 4:50 now. All right, let's go to the phones, and then we've got some, we could have some breaking news coming up for you. Steven's calling in from Fairfax, line 2. Steven, you're on the Vince Coglianese Show. Hello, sir.
Hey, Vince, always a pleasure listening to your show. Just want to say, on this whole racial change stuff, I've long toyed with the thought of transracial. I mean, we're in the year of transgenders. I've been called a black man, a white man in a black man's body, and other denigrating terms because of my politics. So
wait. Why is that denigrating, Stephen? Why would it be denigrating to be a white man?
That's the way it's intended.
Yeah, I know.
That's the way they intend it.
I know.
Okay. So it's denigrating me as a black man because of my politics, which I don't back away from. So hey, let's just play it out. But of course, the left doesn't want because race is a sacred cow for them.
Yes,
it's untouchable,
and they need people to think of themselves first and foremost based on their skin color. It's really important to them that be the case.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. I think it's a bunch of hooey, but let's, we need to, if you can be transgender, why not transracial? And they have to accept that.
Yes, no question. That's why the Rachel Dolezal example is always so perfect. It's like, what's the problem with her? Yeah. She just says she identified as black. She took over as the chapter head of the NAACP in her town. That's really commitment, isn't it, Stephen? You have to really go for it.
Throw out cultural appropriation. Doesn't make sense in a transracial era.
Stephen, thank you for so much common sense. Really appreciate the call. Okay, stand by. We are now seeing Donald Trump has posted to Truth Social here in just the last few minutes. The former president says, I hear deranged Jack Smith, in order to interfere with the presidential election of 2024, will be putting out yet another fake indictment of your favorite president, me, at 5 p.m. Why didn't they do this 2.5 years ago? Why did they wait so long? They wanted to put it right in the middle of my campaign. Prosecutorial misconduct. Ladies and gentlemen, we could have some breaking news coming up in just 2 minutes here on WMAL.